Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of Art the Tea. I'm your host, Ruthie, and today we'll be spilling the tea on the stories behind the art and the artists. I, for one, grew up surrounded by art and artists. I lived it, I breathed it, and I had a knack for it. I enjoyed using charcoals and oils and watercolors, acrylics, pastels. My favorite medium was oil pastels, and I did try growing up. But I never really saw myself as an artist because I quickly saw that there was a difference between a natural talent and composing genius. For instance, think of a piano we're listening to right now, and you can have a natural talent to play the keys, to master the instrument itself, but that is a world away from being able to compose a symphony from scratch. And so I recognized that I was never going to be a famous artist, but I still appreciated art, and during my school days, I would go. I'll be at the back of our galleries, wondering what the artist was thinking about behind the canvas. Were they in love? Were they lost? Were they broke? I'll be honest. Coming back into the art space and just trying to rediscover art and contemporary art, I found this resources a little dry and clinical and losing the human element to it. But whenever I would come across a YouTube video or podcast with the artist speaking, I would immediately perk up because I know a story is coming. And that's why I created this show. In this first series, we're going to be looking at a theme coming home. I wanted this theme to mirror an anthology of poetry I've recently finished with the same theme about coming home to oneself, what home means, etc. Especially today in these uncertain times with war and instability shaping people's perspectives. I was kind of curious to see how that reflected post war generations of artists who turned to landscapes and memories and creation as ways to rebuild their identity after conflict. Coming home is about the ways we and artists search for belonging, peace, and identity, whether through the places they paint, the memories they carry, or the act of creation itself. It's about how art becomes a way of returning to a lighter place from a time of trauma, darkness. Essentially, we're all looking for home. Some of you have been fortunate enough to find it. I, as someone who travels a lot and who has the world as my adopted family, I'm still searching. So, but before we go on, I would just like to pause for a sponsor break. Portables. Paw is a Swiss dog made in Hong Kong. He's a posh dog and he's willing to share his handmade biscuits with you, crafted by his personal chef. So grab a pack by clicking the link below before they run out. Paws biscuits are made of organic blueberry, goji berries, and crunchy peanut butter. Welcome back to the podcast. Right now, we're listening to Gabriel Atchin. He is a British jazz pianist and composer. He is recognized for his swinging bebop style, and personally, he's a new find, but I really like his version of George Gershwin's Summertime. Right now, we're going to be looking at British artist John Miller. John Miller was a British painter born in London in 1931. He was trained as an architect before turning to art full time. He became known for his light, luminous Cornish beachscapes, wide horizons, and radiant skies, and a sense of peace that drew people in. John Miller's work was exhibited widely, and he became closely tied to the identity of Cornwall's artistic landscape. But John's life also included military service. He completed his national service in the Royal Army, stationed in Malta in the early 1950s during the Cold War period. Malta was a strategic hub for the UK, and at his funeral, one of his comrades described him as a good man on a dark night. That mysterious phrase possibly explains the premise of that search for peace that we see in his paintings. John probably knew what it meant to live through very, very dark nights during the Cold War. When he spoke to me about that war period, I could immediately hear the trauma in his voice. So I see the Cornish horizons as probably his way of painting peace onto canvas and of coming home to a much lighter place. As we spill the tea on John Miller, I would like to introduce you to Gabriel Latchin's version of Summertime by George Gershwin. Here's the tea on that famous John Miller style. Even though he became known for Cornwall, that iconic bluey beach look, was actually triggered by a trip to Crete. John described seeing the Mediterranean sky as a rich blue velvet, almost touchable. He spent the rest of his life trying to replicate that feeling in the Cornish landscape. He worked from his home, the beach house in Lelant, looking over at the Hill estuary. The specific shade that he paints was and perfected is fondly known by Cornish locals as the Hail Azure because it's actually something that came from his home and from his mind and from his memory of his visit to Crete. It's a blue so deep it feels like you could fall into it. That color was his way of coming home, of a painting piece, I believe, onto the Cornish landscape. His piece was so contagious, it reached the biggest names in music. Rock star Chris Ray was so moved by one of John's blue sky beaches that he used it for the cover of his 2000 album, King of the Beach. And John's work even appeared on the set of EastEnders, the BBC television series that has been running since 1985 and is a household staple in the UK. John also used in his art. He associated sunrises with renewal, but if you see a moonrise in any Miller painting, that was his personal symbol for the death of his mother. Even in grief, he was painting his way back home to her memory. Now let's travel back. I'm traveling to a place that is a little uncomfortable for me, but this is a story about a lost gift. As a traveler, I realized that traveling can be heavy at times. John once sent me a gift, a small original painting. I loved it so much, I carried it everywhere in my sketchbook. I was moving through different homes, and somewhere between the moves, that sketchbook vanished. John passed away shortly after, and for years I felt like I had betrayed his generosity. I couldn't even bring myself to return to Cornwall because the guilt felt like a wall. But I realize now that John understood that things are transient. He found his sanctuary in the turquoise waters of the Isles of Scilly, where the Atlantic hits the white sand and everything becomes light. He has gone now to his eternal peace, but he left us a body of work, including the massive Conobia Land of the Saints mural in the Truro Cathedral that reflects the peace that the world really needs right now. John Miller's art was always about coming home to Cornwall, to light and to peace. And by telling his story here, I'm feeling finally a sense of peace myself. Losing a piece of art is really hard, but the story is what remains. On the next episode, we're looking at Ashila Gorky, a man who used oil paint to recreate a home that was physically taken from him during the Armenian genocide. This was Art, the T, and I'm O'Ruthie. I'll see you in the gallery.